You are now listening to a member of the Disney Podcast family. Head over to Disney Podcast Family on Instagram to see all the latest posts for this show and links to other great Disney podcasts.
Welcome, dreamers and believers. You're listening to Imagine That, a Light in the Window production.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first episode of Imagine That. This is going to be the Imagineering podcast of Walt's apartment, where we are talking all things Imagineering, how it works, how it goes, and what we want to see from it, but bringing all of our imaginative thoughts together as a team and sharing all things Imagineering. I am joined by four of my awesome co-hosts, starting off with Sam. Sam, how are you?
I am fantastic. There are only three co-hosts. You are the fourth host here.
I was counting myself. I'm sorry.
We're gonna roll with it. We're gonna roll with it because that's what we do here. I am great. I'm super excited. So most people know this, but the reason that I was brought into Walt's apartment as a family member was to discuss Imagineering, and I was brought in for Extra Magic Hour to do an Imagineering feature. And we're just taking that and putting it into a bigger picture here, and getting more input, and I don't have to sit and talk to myself about it. So I'm excited that you guys are here too, and that I get to, be part of this. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I'm stoked that you're here. And now that we've gotten our count back, our second co-host, Amanda with Where in the Park. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so excited for this podcast. When we first did our Halloween overlay episode for Walt's Apartment podcast, like Kevin and I went all in, and we were Imagineers for that brief moment in time, and it was so much fun. So when the idea was pitched for an Imagineering podcast, like, that's our jam. Like, let's go. So I'm super excited to be here and can't wait to get started.
And if you haven't heard Kevin and Amanda's idea from that episode, go back and give that episode a listen, because they are incredibly thorough, and I mean, they kind of put the rest of us to shame, but we love that. We love when people come with big ideas and bring big ideas to the table.
Absolutely. And with that big idea, there's no way we can only have one of the dynamic duo without having the second one. And rounding out the team, we have Kevin from Where in the Park. Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well over here. I'm pretty excited for this. I've obviously been a big fan of parks, theme parks, and Disneyland specifically for forever. Walt Disney World I went to when I was 10, and I've been back many times since. And I'm ready to talk all about what I've learned about Imagineering, and hopefully I'll learn something along the way, along with everyone listening.
Absolutely. And with that, I mean, it only seems right that we talk about what is Imagineering. And so, Sam, why don't you share with us, what is Imagineering?
I am going to hit you with the definition from Disney first, and then we can talk about what that means. But Walt Disney Imagineering is the creative engine that designs and builds all Disney theme parks, resorts, attractions, and cruise ships worldwide, and oversees the creative aspects of Disney games, merchandise, product development, and publishing businesses. So there are actually over 100 roles in Imagineering. You can't even begin to fathom like what exactly all of that means. That you have show writers, you have costume designers, you have special effects, video effects, you have engineers, literally the list goes on. Anything that you see that goes into a theme park or a cruise ship or any attraction, any hidden Mickey that you see, any show script, those are all done by Imagineers. So if it's something that you are experiencing as a guest of the Walt Disney Company, Imagineers brought that to you. So it started with research and development, AKA, does anybody know how it first got started? Does anybody know the original Imagineering? Amanda?
I think Walt wanted to make a park, right?
Walt wanted to make a park, and who did he have sit down to draw that park for him?
Herb Ryman.
Herb Ryman. He and Herb Ryman sat together in a room. There were a couple other people there, but we really don't talk about that story all too much. We give all the credit to Herb Ryman. And Herb Ryman wasn't even working for the company at the time. He was brought back by Walt, and Walt said, I have this vision, and we are going to the stakeholders on Monday. Roy's taking the plans. You need to be able to draw this up, give them everything that they need to make a decision on whether they are going to invest or not. Roy was going to take it to the banks. So that is where Imagineering got started. And then officially, it was 1952, I believe. Let me double check that. It was 1952 that they officially started the research and development and design part of the company. They wanted to make sure that it was outside of anything media related. They wanted to make sure that it was completely separate as an entity. So that was how they decided they were going to build the Disneyland park more distinctly than they were the studios. 1952. Then in 1986, they changed it to WED, which is Walter Elias Disney, Walt's initials. And then eventually...
Hold on. What was his middle name?
Elias.
It's
you guys say Elias?
No,
is it Elias?
No.
Okay,
It's
well,
Elias.
Okay, well, you're right. It is. But that's also a weird thing here because I have multiple students whose names are spelled that way, but it's Elias. Elias.
I mean, he was
but
born in
thank you.
Chicago, so maybe we're all pronouncing it wrong.
No, it's Elias. You're right. You're right. I think it's more. It's okay. No, you're right. My brain just did a thing for a second. It happens sometimes. Listen, teacher brain. So yes, it is Walter Elias Disney. And then eventually they just dropped off the rest of it and they put engineering and imagination together because that is what Imagineering is. It is the creation of all things out of the imagination to create an experience for park goers and cruisers and anybody consuming anything that is not film material from the Disney company. So
it's such a unique thing that it was called Imagineering for so long, but it didn't get the official title for some time quite a bit after. I mean, it was known as WED for so long, even after Walt's passing. It was that Imagineering was just a job title, and the fact that it's now a full enterprise under the Disney umbrella is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and when we're watching the Imagineering story, like that's when I learned about Michael Eisner discovering like this kind of hidden area where all the Imagineers were and how his driver even got lost getting to the building because that's how infrequent, people went there. And so to know that everything that goes on under the Imagineering umbrella is so incredibly important today, but back then it was just kind of an afterthought, kind of like redheaded stepchild, just kind of.
But it was never that way for Walt.
No.
It was never that way for Walt. Walt leaned entirely on his Imagineers. He had relationships with as many of them as possible. Mm-hmm. And he knew they were the magic makers. He put full faith in them. And if they weren't giving him what they asked, like what he asked for, he made sure that they knew, for one. But two, he gave them so much creative liberty and he trusted in them. And I think that is what allowed us to get the things that we got initially from Imagineering and the things that we got while Walt was around. And shortly after, because we had those Disney legends that Walt entrusted to create the original park. It's definitely, there's been a lot of changes in Imagineering, and we will consistently talk about that on this show. But Walt created an environment where collaboration, creativity, ingenuity, and taking chances, even if it doesn't work, was going to be valued. So I'm going a little bit into our next topic there. I'm getting a little sentimental over here.
I would not be surprised if this show brings out a little more sentimental, and not only us, but those that are listening, because I feel like Imagineering is, I shouldn't say that I think it is. It's like the pulse of Disney, at least when it comes to parks. But I think parks is, again, a lot of the pulse of Disney. So I would not be surprised if those listening, those that have watched the Imagineering story, are listening to us, hear us sharing it. I would not be surprised that through this journey, there are a few sentimental moments.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who's walked through a Disney park anywhere has felt the impact of Imagineering, whether they've realized it or not. And I think that's what's going to be so great about this show, is that we're going to highlight all that Imagineering is, and hopefully open up the eyes of those going to the parks, and even those who will go to the parks hopefully someday, that, you know, they can appreciate the parks even more, because now they know who signed everything.
Yeah. That first experience and every other experience walking into a Disney park is a full immersion. And you can recognize that when you walk in, if it's your first time or not, because it's not an experience that's provided in a lot of other places. But I'm excited, like Amanda was just saying, to share some of those things that people don't typically know about, because then when you're walking through a certain land and you're like, hey, I heard that on Imagine That, it is more exciting to you. You feel like you are even more immersed into the experience than you might have been. You feel like you're part of the history because you know the history.
Definitely. But so I'm curious, and this might be throwing a smaller curveball. Why is it so important though? Why is Imagineering so important? Because I mean, everyone likes to talk about it, but I don't think anybody understand. I don't think a lot of people understand why it's such a key piece in Disney. So, I mean, throwing it out across the room, I'll start with Kevin, since Kevin's been very quiet this first episode. Kevin, why do you think Imagineering is so important?
Imagineering is important because, I mean, obviously amusement parks existed before Disney, but he brought people in who were able to convert it into something, those silly amusements, into an actual immersive experience that, I don't know, listening to other people talking, he had an idea to turn it into, like, you know, where you're walking through a movie set where everything feels like you're inside of something that is real but is not real at the same time. And it's one of those things where with Imagineering, it makes it happen. And without having Walt taking the ambitious step to actually get a group of people together, if he had just kept this like bottled up himself, tried to do it himself, it never would have happened. But his willingness to spread out and say, hey, who can do the impossible? Because he has a famous quote about how it's kind of fun to do the impossible. But when you look at it, like, Walt didn't do a lot of the impossible things himself, but he did the impossible, getting other people to collaborate to create things that couldn't have been done without doing that. And that's why I think it's so important. Especially like other theme parks today, you could tell they were inspired by the way that Walt was like, hey, we need people who can do things together to make magic. Whereas before it was kind of a weird industry of roller coasters that were all wooden coasters and carnival rides that could have.
Yeah, it was like a carnival that just stayed in its location year round.
And yeah, no one cleaned stuff back then, apparently, according to Lillian's quotes from Walt.
Yeah. And that was another thing that was a huge part of initial Imagineering planning, was how are we going to keep things clean? What systems are we going to put in place? That's part of Imagineering. A lot of people think that that's not, but anything that goes into the parks, there were genius brains behind it that talked about building those things. Like, what other park has a utilidor? That was put in place to make the park experience what it is.
I was just thinking about that too as we were talking, because that is so behind the scenes that the average guest doesn't even know about. But that was something that was so intentional of like, how do we get cast members from one area to the other? How do we deal with trash? How do we deal with like all of this stuff? That's all on the first level of the Magic Kingdom. And
Magic Kingdom.
I said that.
Said at the same time over here.
You're on a delay. No,
I know.
So anyway, but the other thing of why it's so important to me, back to what Kevin was talking about, was that Walt saw the potential in people, that he was able to tap into the creative abilities, even if that person didn't know that they had that creative ability. And he gave them kind of free reign to explore that, and get messy and make mistakes, and just tap into that creative side and dive into the impossible. If you told me, hey, we have a weekend to build a map of something that doesn't exist yet so we can convince beginners, I would lose my mind. I would be under so much stress and pressure. But Walt clearly saw that like capability in Herb Ryman and said, let's go, let's do this. And they made it happen. And so I think that Imagineering is so important because it brings together so many creative people in a way that I feel like nothing else does, if that makes sense. And no other park, no other company has Imagineering the way that Disney does. And so that's, to me, what makes Disney so great in terms of theme parks, because it's that high bar, that expectation, that gold standard that Walt put in place that is still carried out today. And that's something that we should treasure.
I agree entirely, Amanda. Walt was very versed in recognizing people for their unique talents and pushing them outside of their comfort bubbles and helping them recognize their greatness. And that greatness brought us greatness in the things that they were providing to us, the experiences that they were creating. Because when you spark a fire in someone and make them realize that they have this incredible potential, they are not going to want to give up. They are going to want to keep going until they provide the best experience that they can provide. And it was relationship building for Walt. So he built relationships with his Imagineers. He created this atmosphere where they were allowed to express themselves and make mistakes, and everything was okay because they were going to figure it out. So when you give people that kind of control over their working environment and you believe in people as much as Walt did, you got a beautiful product in return. So he believed in people, which then led them to believe in themselves and believe in the work that they were doing. If people don't believe in the work that they're doing, they're not going to be able to sell it to anybody. So Imagineering is what sells the parks. You have to believe in the work that you're putting out there, the work that you're creating, the experiences that you're providing. And Walt created that through Imagineering. I don't know. I could literally go on for days and days and days because I'm incredibly passionate about this.
When you think of the word Imagineering, though, it's engineering your imagination. So if you can imagine it. You can imagine that, there's going to be all types of rainbows and horseshoes and all of that, all the fun stuff, right? But if you can't engineer how that works, well, then it can't be done. But also, too, if you try to engineer something that's not believable, it's not going to work. And I think a lot of other theme parks miss that. They're like, hey, we are going to slap this on there and the fans are going to like it. Or we are going to create something so complex that has no story to it that the fans will just enjoy it for what it is. Imagineering is you being able to execute your own plan. Yes, either by yourself or with a team. What did Walt do? He executed not only Walt Disney Studios, or Laughograms or any of those prior projects. And now he's like, you know what? I'm going to build a theme park that is going to stand the test of time, a theme park that is going to be very much like everything else, but also at the same time, nothing like anything else. So it's that imagination to do that, and also putting all the cogs and gears in place to engineer them. And with Imagineering today in Disney, a lot of that stuff happens internally. So therefore, the plans are the designs are thought out. The plans are ran through of how to build this. I mean, we will touch on it in a later episode, but a perfect example of giving you story and engineer is the Tree of Life at Epcot. The thing is an oil rig. It's an oil rig skeleton into a tree. We'll get deep dive that probably on the episode, but Imagineering is very much believing in something so much that you can also build it. And on that same topic, though, I'm curious, and it's kind of throwing this question backwards a little bit. What does Imagineering mean to you?
Before we switch to that, one sec, can I add something that's what you just said, Lou?
Yeah.
So, engineering has limits. Imagineering does not, because your imagination doesn't have limits. So if you keep your imagination, you're not going to lose that drive to keep moving forward to figure it out. If you are just like, I'm going to build this, here's point A, point B, point C, and you get stuck somewhere along the way, and you don't have the imagination, you don't have the creative ingenuity to keep going, engineering has found its limit. But when you add imagination to it, the imagination keeps going. You don't stop until you get the desired result. However, that's not what we're always seeing currently. But that was the expectation that Walt had for his Imagineers when he was still around, is it didn't work, figure out a way to make it work. We'll keep trying it until we figure it out.
Well, I know there's a saying in Imagineering where no good idea goes away as well.
Yeah.
To that point of like, maybe the engineering isn't ready for that great idea today, but they'll keep it and they'll go back to it once it is possible. Like Space Mountain was designed years before it was even possible.
Yep.
But once they had the computer system that can actually handle the braking of that many vehicles, they went for it.
I'm going to credit Imagineering with growth mindset. You may not be ready for it yet, but there's always a path that you can take. Just if you may not be ready for it yet. The power of yet.
Yeah. And going off of what Kevin said about tomorrow, or Space Mountain, the aerial ride was another ride that was shelved, I think twice, if I'm not mistaken. Originally supposed to be in DCA, or Disneyland's Fantasyland. Then there was an aerial ride in the blueprint. I want to say it's called New Fantasyland at Walt Disney World. And then the ride finally made its way into the remodel of DCA. But the aerial ride was an attraction that was shelved, I believe, twice. And the reason being is that the issue was, how do we translate a ride to go from above water to underwater to back up above water? How do we translate that without doing the submarine technology, because the submarine technology is very limited capacity and you couldn't tell aerial story through a submarine? How do we do that without, there's a very morbid part, shoving people underwater and hope they breathe? Obviously, that's not very much good in engineering. So the Little Mermaid attraction actually got shelved twice. One for sure, I'll have to do my homework on the New Fantasyland, but originally it was supposed to be in Fantasyland and Disneyland. I forgot when the planned remodel was, but yeah, the aerial ride got shelved. And that was because of technology.
I know the design for that ride was on like one of the old DVDs that came out, like one of the early Little Mermaid DVDs. The special edition was the like mock-up they made for that ride that never came to fruition.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that's where I saw it.
Yeah, I don't know if that was an engineering problem or if that was just a budgeting problem.
I want to say it was a storytelling problem because they couldn't translate the water scenes. How do you sell that story? How do you make it believable? But if I'm not mistaken, you're correct. I think it was on the DVD that I saw it on, if I'm not mistaken, was that Imagineering DVD they had at Disneyland for a little while before Disney Plus had the Imagineering story. I'll have to look it up again and pull it out, but I want to say that's where I got the info from.
I know it's a special feature on one of the, like I said, the Little Mermaid actual Blu-ray for the movie.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. But
look at that, already learning new things.
Yeah.
And there's another topic we can further cover because we've got more to research.
That's right. But to that point, how many things are on the shelf right now that we don't know about that in 5, 10, 20, 50 years time are going to make its way to the parks? Like, that's what I'm excited about, you know? Like, what are these? I guarantee that there are so many ideas from the original Imagineers from Walt's time that are still on the shelves. And the technology just hasn't caught up to it yet, but it will one day. And those are going to be amazing. You know, in 20 years' time, like, this is a Rolly Crump original. Like, we are bringing this back, you know, out of the vault, whatever they want to call it. It's going to be awesome.
Will they tell us?
We'll know. Like, that's Rolly style right there.
It's like nowadays they do come out with a little more information than they used to about who designed the original.
Because they realize that we love that. Like, there are people who want to consume that. You're looking at 4 of them right now. So, Walt Disney Company, if you're listening, just tell us the original idea, creator, because we'll take it.
Yeah.
You know, they told us, like, with Frozen about the Snow Queen was on the shelf for years. They were willing to share that story with us. So hopefully they'll share future stories about Imagineering with us too.
I mean, hopefully we'll get an Imagineering story too, season 2.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up a good point though about things that are in the catalog. Like, what is in the pipeline at the moment? I mean, obviously we saw the Imagineering Award, and I'm blanking the gentleman's name. With the cool floating floor, I forget his name. He just got the award. He's the second person to do it next to Walt Disney. But I mean, think about the stuff he's inventing in there, or him and his team are doing R&D on right now, that are looking to hit the parks soon, later, never. I mean, there's so many things and that's the cool thing about Imagineering. What we see today was potentially thought up of what, 3, 4, 5 years ago, depending on the timeline. I mean, so it's really cool to understand that they have the inside scoop of what's to come before we do. I mean, to sit there and I don't know how I could never work for Imagineering to be able to, like, hey, I can't say, but I can't wait till 2028. You guys are going to be, minds are blown, even though right now it's just a spreadsheet, some cool rendering docs, and some RenderMan videos. But, like, I would fail to be an Imagineer because I would want to spill the beans so much and just talk about it and share what's coming.
Were you talking about Lanny Smoot?
That's his name. Yes.
I had to look it up really quick. I was like, it's on the tip of my tongue, so I had to look it up. So yes, he's the only other person from the Walt Disney Company, aside from Walt, to ever be inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame.
But out of curiosity, though, so we're talking about, like, what's to come. But for you, I mean, our individual selves, with what we have now, what is your favorite thing to come out of Imagineering thus far? Not what's coming, what is out on the shelf already here. What is your favorite thing that come out of Imagineering?
For me, and this is kind of spoiler into the next question, but for me, it's the audio animatronic of the shaman and a Navi River Journey. She's amazing. She looks right at you. She has so many moving parts, and she's just incredible. And I love her so much.
So for me, I'm going a completely different angle. And I'm going to go with the storytelling aspect of the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, because it is embedded into so many different attractions, so many different parks. And if you don't know about it, you don't know about it. But if you do know about it, you get to geek out so hard. So it's this extra little element of Imagineering that is given to make the park feel more special to certain people. So, I mean, I don't care that everyone doesn't get it, because I get it. But so for me, that is something that's super special.
See, now I want to change my answer. That's a great answer.
What about you, Kevin?
For me, I'm thinking right now, maybe the Haunted Mansion, like as far as just the individual thing that amazes me with Imagineering, especially at Disneyland, where they had the problem of the train tracks and they had to solve it. And they didn't just go, hey, let's just put a tunnel. They were like, let's solve this with a story, which is just crazy if you just think about it, like how much work they had to go and put into put in the Omnimover system over on the other side of the berm, and then to get you down there with an elevator that looks like it's a room. And and I'll have it where it's a hallway that you're willing to walk down without feeling like you're being forced to walk for no reason. It's an amazing testament to their ability to solve a problem. Like I love Rise of the Resistance in like a similar way that they made the different rooms and stuff for you to go through, but they aren't really solving a problem. They were just put there to stall you along the line, which for the Haunted Mansion, that ended up being a benefit of what they did, but it wasn't the catalyst for it. They did it because they had to solve a problem. They had to imagine a way to get around the issue of we don't have room in the park for this huge attraction that you're dreaming of. So that's what I love about it.
Man, that's a really good answer. And it's so hard. Like I was sitting here reading the question and what's my favorite thing to come out of Imagineering? And I was all over the place. I mean, I still am, because there's so many different layers to think of the favorite thing to come out of Imagineering. I mean, a very simple answer I want to say is the parks. But then there's the things about the parks, like you were sharing with Haunted Mansion, that overcoming the train tunnel. But then you look at, well, what about the Imagineers or the one Imagineer that put up a berm? I mean, I don't think he was ever credited as an official Imagineer, but like, let's build the berm and let's distract all from all of reality. So there's so many layers to this. For me, I think my favorite part, though, that should come out of Imagineering has got to be just the stories of guys doing something that wasn't them. You take Tony Baxter, and he was just an ice cream scooper, and then now he's one of the most known Imagineers. I mean, you listen to interviews with Joe Rogan.
Scooped popcorn after he scooped ice cream. Give him some credit.
But I mean, so like doing that, you listen to guys like Joe Rogan and their stories about what they do and why they do it. Where like, yes, I'm an Imagineer, thank you, but this is what I do. So I for me, the best thing that came out of Imagineering is probably got to be the stories and like the footprints to follow on how to do what they did, especially your core Imagineers prior to going overseas for parks. So for me, it's got to be the stories.
So then what if you had to pick one thing that is like an Imagineering masterpiece, or it's like a perfect piece of Imagineering?
Which story is your favorite story?
Well, it depends. What kind of story are we talking? Like the bio story of this Imagineer, the story translated through a ride or an attraction? Like what story? Because for me, and this might be a spoiler when we get into our Imagineers individual talks, but for me, when it comes to Imagineers, I'm going Joe Rogan. I love his storytelling and how he does it and why he does it. But if we're going theme park attraction story-wise, I probably got to go I probably got to go Pirates. And it could be because I just been watching Imagineering story. But Pirates, I mean, for the first 8 minutes of that ride, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing, but we love it. I mean, you hear the dead man tells no tales. You got 2 drops, and you're just hearing storm sounds. There's nothing there until about halfway through the ride, and then you're finally in the story. So for me, I got to go with Pirates because you're so immersed and excited, and there's absolutely nothing happening besides listening to nice acoustic sounds.
There's so much happening in the first 8 minutes. It's all in your imagination and the anticipation and the buildup. Setting
Well, I
the
think
stage.
Pirates is also a good example of Imagineering because it also had that same problem as the Haunted Mansion of how do you get people to a different spot than where they are right now because we can't build right here. So in order to get you below ground and to the other side of the berm, I believe you still go over there for that ride too. That's why you have 2 drops. It's not because they thought that'd be exciting. It's because they had to get you to there in order to be able to see a show. But they made it exciting instead of just putting in stairs, which would have been a solution for many other companies, I'm sure. But they're like, no, we're going to have where you load right here on this side, and you're going to take a boat, and then we're just going to drop you over to the other side to have it where all of a sudden you're in the ride.
Exactly. And I agree with you, man. That's why I think that Pirates has the best story, because realistically, there's nothing telling you to feel any type of way besides the story that's painted on the walls. There's no obvious, hey, be happy, be scared. No, the story is we're just going to give you models and sets and let you feel how you want to feel until you get into the actual, here's what we're doing, here's how you should feel part of the ride. So for me, ride-wise, Pirates, I think, has the best story for Imagineering.
How do you feel about Imagineering changing the story for Paris, though? Because over there, you start with them alive, then you drop, and then they're dead. Or they're skeletons, should I say.
It depends. I mean, I've not been on it, but it might be a little different. But for me, any Pirates outside of Disneyland's Pirate, the story doesn't hit the same because I've already heard this story. So, and I'm a very big believer on, I don't want to see copycat rides from other Disneyland parks in the same land outside of your already cookie cutter attractions. And by that, I mean Dumbo. Dumbo isn't nothing special that you haven't seen at another theme park, but it's got that nice amount of Imagineer sugar on there that you're like, that's a Disney attraction. The Teacups, that's a Sizzler ride. So those ones I'm like, eh. But rides like Haunted Mansion and Mystic Manor, I feel like those are very similar, but very different.
That is exactly where I was about to go next.
Pirates was in Shanghai, where you're the 3D screens and the boats are spinning. That's a different story than the Pirates we know. But anything that's copying the same story, I'm going to go where it originated first. So, for instance, Journey Through Imagination, you could bring that to DCA. I have never been on the one in Florida, but I would say the one in Florida probably hits 10 times better.
There's already been 3 iterations. Here's the thing with that. So, we all know Journey into Imagination is my jam. I am so irate about the fact that we do not have what Tony Baxter gave us. And Tony Baxter said, he said he will come out of retirement to re-give us the proper ride with the Rainbow Corridor and the Dream Finder and all of the actual magic that was put into that ride for the opening of it. So no, if they were to give you guys that in Disneyland, I would be, or at DCA, you said, right? At DCA, I would be there in a heartbeat because they took it away from us here. And what they gave us was half-assed and took out all of the things that made it a literal journey through your imagination. So
what if they built the same ride improved, but on both coasts identically?
I'd be great with that. Honestly, give me the Rainbow Corridor. The Rainbow Corridor is still there. Just turn it back on. Turn it back on.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Rainbow Corridor, Lou?
No. That is one ride that I have been interested in seeing, and I have avoided seeing it on YouTube. I mean, I've virtually been through all of Walt Disney World and its 4 parks virtually, but that one I have strayed away from for a lot of reasons.
Right now, you wouldn't love it. You wouldn't love it right now. I'm going to be completely honest.
The current version of the ride is not the best.
You would not love it right now. It's kind of dorky. And not in a good way. Not in a Sam dorky kind of way.
That was another Imagineering situation where they lost the sponsorship money from Kodak. They had to figure out how to keep the ride running without the extra money. And they have kept it that way for too long, in my opinion.
And then that's a topic that I have in the back pocket for Mad Tea Party is sponsorship for rides. It's a really interesting subject, but that is neither here or there. But I mean, I would love to see, like, that's one of the rides I am anticipating to see next March when I'm out there, is to see and just to ride it, just to kind of get that first feel. I get it may not be the original, but there is a lot of talk and a lot of hype and a lot of pride in the character Figment, and I wanna see why. I mean, but that's the fun part about Imagineering is really seeing, okay, this is good. How can it be better? So, I mean, the way I look at it,
Figment, he is supposed to embody what Imagineering is. Using every aspect of your senses and your environment to immerse yourself in an imaginative experience. We've lost a lot of that. But that is what Imagineering wants or is supposed to provide for us, right? What we expect it to provide is using all of our senses to put us in an experience where we don't feel like we're in the reality around us. So that is kind of like what Figment tries to preach, but it's missing the mark right now. But for me, that's who Figment embodies as a character. That's who he embodies for me.
So Kevin and Amanda, what is something for you guys that it is a symbol of Imagineering?
Well,
or a beacon of Imagineering.
Yeah, for me, it's exactly what Sam said. It's something that embodies all of your senses. And for me, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but that is Pandora, the world of Avatar, because you have everything. There's no characters walking around, but you hear them in the bushes. There's sounds. There's special lighting effects at night. It's 2 totally different worlds. You have, I don't even know how Joe Rohde and team created the sculptures. I'm still just in awe of that engineering marvel that is that land. You have the smells, just everything. You are in a completely different world that it takes me out of being at a theme park at all. You know, it's one of the few lands that I lose track of time in and lose kind of like where I'm at. Like there's some corners, it kind of some windy paths, and you're like, wait, I'm venturing in this world and I'm not quite sure. I kind of turn around a little bit, and it's the rides are kind of tucked away. And there's so much to the imagination in that land. And then it gets dark and the bioluminescence come in, and it's a completely different experience in the same area. So I think that area just really embodies all of your senses, and that's my answer. Perfect Imagineering.
For me, I don't know. I mean, I do love the world of Avatar over there in Animal Kingdom. But for me, I think it's just walking down Main Street heading toward the castle in any of the castle parks. Just makes me feel like I am entering into I don't know if it's just nostalgia really, but obviously like the trend of the century isn't my own nostalgia, but being at Disney is my nostalgia. And I like that they've kept it similar enough to how it was when I was little. They've only kind of improved things, in my opinion. I know I've heard other people complain about the paint jobs they put on some of the buildings, but I don't know. I love it. I think I've been to 3 castle parks. Yeah, we've been to
That
Disneyland, Magic Kingdom, and Disneyland Paris, and all
that
3 of
is
those
where
just walking down the street. Yeah,
that's where you first experience Imagineering, when you're walking into the parks, because that is the first story that you're being told. You've got we've got the train station, and that is like the curtains. Then you've got, the Red Path Road that leads you down to the main event. And so you've got Main Street leading you to the main event, which is the castle. You are being told a story the second you walk into a Disney park. You are being led to the main event, and then the main event is branching you off into these other magical stories. It's storytelling, honestly. Like, if you can't tell a good story, you're not gonna be able to sell it to anybody. For me, my beacon, because of that, is Mystic Manor in Hong Kong, as Lou brought up earlier. It's a different story because they had to appreciate the audience that they have. So in Hong Kong, they don't appreciate the dead the way that we do. They see things differently. It's a different experience. They appreciate the dead more, I should say. Let's just say that. They value the dead so much that they don't want to see ghost in an attraction. So they had to retell the Haunted Mansion story through a magical perspective, where you have this quirky little monkey who opens a music box and makes all these weird, kooky things happen, but you're still having a Haunted Mansion-esque experience. So identifying your audience, being able to tell a story that your audience will. I am going into Marty's 10 Laws right now, which will be another episode, but you have to understand your audience, which I think is the first thing for Imagineering, is understand your audience. And I think that they did that with Mystic Manor, and they created an experience that was different than they created in the other parks with the Haunted Mansion type rides. And they gave us something that was really beautiful, really incredible, with great storytelling, fully immersive, as we've talked about. So I'm going to go with that being my beacon.
Man. Am I last?
You are.
Oh, dude, I gotta stop going last. I don't like it. Because you guys give all good answers, and then I'm like, well, like the whole time you guys are sharing, I was like, ooh, that's no, that, oh, buddy. So for me, I may be a little biased. It may be the thing, but
he's about to say Splash Mountain.
No.
Kidding.
I think Splash Mountain is a great Imagineering ride.
he's gonna say Jurassic Park, I think.
Yeah, Jurassic. There it is, the Universal pun right there.
Universal.
Yep. I would say I'm gonna go Toontown. I mean, to give the characters a home in your park and the storyline, like, hey, that's where Mickey and the gang lives. I mean, and a lot of people don't like it, but I feel like everything is so detailed. I mean, and all of the, especially Toontown 2.0. I mean, Goofy's Playhouse, there's so many little sounds and sensories and just everything, but also too allowing, and I get it's very crowded at the moment and it has been, but to give so many areas for parents just to go, chill, and enjoy the park. And going back to what Walt said, a place where adults and their children can have fun too. Like, I went yesterday to the parks and I let the kids run loose for a few minutes in Goofy's backyard. They had a blast. And to them, it's a whole new world. To us adults, it's 2 slides and a few acoustic toys. I mean, I have 4 parks around me that have slides and acoustic toys, but it's not the Disney touch. So for me, Toontown is a very much a beacon for Imagineering, because they said, hey, and how seamless the new ride, the Mickey and Minnie's Railroad. Granted, I have my reserves on the ride story inside, but the Lion Q, the outside aesthetic, I feel bad for the people in Florida. I feel like we got the better version. It fits in so seamlessly. Like there's not even like, that's new. No, it fits in well. All of the way the cartoon world is painted, the way the houses are built, the way just so much storytelling in that one land. And not only that, it's a heavy hitter when it comes to lands. I mean, it's got what, three attractions, a restaurant. It's got a handful of meet and greets. I mean, there's so much going on in that land, and I think it's really well done. I mean, there's some creative contradictions with the new Mickey and Minnie, but I'll say that for the Mac Tea Party and not here. But I mean, I would say Toontown is a beacon of let's give a TV character a home in our home, and the fans are going to gobble it up as this is Mickey's home.
So I have a question for you guys that just popped up for me. When you're thinking of your beacon, do you want it, like, do you think about how marketable it is with merchandise? Like, does merchandise come into play for you when it comes to thinking of Imagineering and like your beacon?
For me, no. I didn't think of merchandise at all.
Right?
Because merchandising is part of the Imagineering experience, is you need to be able to sell things, right?
True.
I don't know why that just popped into my head. So that's going to have to be, that's there you go. There's another show topic, is how does merchandising going into, or Imagineering go into merchandising?
But, at the same time, like for my land of Pandora, they have the little, banshees.
So that is why that is actually what got me thinking about it, Amanda, is I was thinking like, we have the Night Blossom drink, which is like, that screams Pandora to me. We do have like the banshees, and you have these different things in the different lands. Like you have droids, you can build a lightsaber. So merchandising is something really that goes into, I'm talking about Galaxy's Edge. Louis gave me a look.
Yeah.
For a second. I just
you can't do that in Avatar Land.
I just jumped from Pandora to Galaxy's Edge. So I was going with thematic merchandising. But that's part of Imagineering.
Modern Imagineering too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if the original Imagineers really focused on that.
They didn't. Like they really didn't sell much in the parks. They sold probably balloons, and were bubble wands a thing then?
For me, I didn't think about marketing or like profit wise, because I feel like an Imagineer's job is, hey, I'm going to create this, whether it makes money or doesn't make money. I have created something wonderful. Now, our marketing team, it's on you to turn this into a profitable thing.
But the thing is, when it comes to merchandising, like being able to create merchandise for land, that's a job in Imagineering. That is one of the roles of Imagineering.
Some merchandise, yes. Some
like Haunted Mansion is incredibly profitable when it comes to merchandise.
Correct. But for Imagineering, some items are designed by Imagineering, and some of it is not. I mean, when you look at t-shirts, ears, stuff like that,
I guess my question is, when Imagineers are building an attraction or a land, should they be thinking about what kind of merchandise they are going to create?
I don't think so. Because
what about experiences that end up being merchandise?
What do you mean by that?
Like droids and lightsabers.
Well, I mean, lightsabers is an experience, yes. I don't think the droids panned out to be an experience. I mean, when we took both of my boys to get the droids, and we've just followed the instruction sheet on the crate. They went and built them, and then they helped bring it to life, and that was it. Now, what I've seen from the lightsaber and how that story goes, that right there, I think is very cool. I mean, but if I'm an Imagineer, I'm thinking, hey, we can have a room where they're building lightsabers. And then, boom, that could be just an experience. You don't actually have to keep yours. But then the marketing team comes in and says, hey, what if we create the pieces for them to build and buy a lightsaber? So if I'm an Imagineer, I'm thinking about all these things. I'm sharing it like, hey, you could build a lightsaber this line. Like, what? That's a cool idea. We can turn that into merchandise. So I think as an Imagineer, you're throwing everything on the wall, and then your marketing team is picking the stuff that can become profitable.
So Imagineering, in your opinion, Lou, this is what I'm hearing, so correct me if I'm wrong, should not have a focus on making money. They should have a focus primarily on creating experiences.
I think,
and
then,
and then if they put enough value in the experiences that they're creating and they put enough oomph into it, the experience will sell itself.
I think if the story warrants something to be turned into a profitable margin, yes. I don't think they should have any guidelines or restraints on their storytelling, because at that point it's just your imagination, paper, and a pencil, where beyond the limit, go.
Well, to be completely honest, it's probably a tablet at this point, but yes. I'm glad we're on the same page here, though.
But
that is exactly how I feel.
I mean, I don't think you should be thinking about anything. I don't think you should be thinking about ride capacity. I don't even think you should be thinking about ride systems. I think you should just be like, for instance, if you take Avatar, how cool would it be to think like you could ride a Banshee? Riding a Banshee could be anything. It could be riding a Banshee like Heimlich's choo-choo train, where you're just on a Banshee, just like Boba Fett, like a bantha. You know, you're just on this little like bump and go ride, or you're on what we have. But if I'm an Imagineer, I'm pitching you're flying on a Banshee through Avatar. What does that look like? I don't know, but that's something cool we can do. I think you're throwing everything out there, and then the team you are working with says, riding a Banshee can be a ride. Riding a Banshee can be a meet and greet. Riding a Banshee could be some cool paid experience where you're flying an actual Banshee that we're going to build, where your team is then taking that and doing something with it.
And trying to figure out what makes sense, what can practically be done. Because I mean, like,
I'm sure you could make some type of like hovered power thing where, I don't know, but I'm sure if you give them the time, you never know. So, but I don't think Imagineers, when they are building a story, they're not thinking attractions. They're giving the story.
But that is like why there are so many components to Imagineering.
Absolutely.
You have show writers, you have storytellers, you have concept design. Then you have the people who have like the mechanical part. You have the people. So like it's a team, as we discussed earlier. It's not one person. So I don't want us to get stuck on just thinking of Imagineering as the storytelling, because that is the primary thing that is going to bring money into the parks. Yes, is the storytelling. Because once you have the solid storytelling, then all of those other pieces can fall into place.
Well, I mean, you have your project manager.
But they're all Imagineers. You have your creative directors, yes.
But somebody at some point says, this land is, and then it starts evolving from that. But I don't think anybody that's at the starting line of a project is thinking anything profit or anything like that. Their key goal for themselves is, how do I deliver a solid story?
Well, it shouldn't be their key goal for themselves. It should be the key goal for the experience, the guest that they're providing the experience to. That's why I said it's like, know your audience. So it doesn't matter what you or I want, because we could tell a story that nobody's going to give a shit about. We have to know our audience, and we have to think about the guests that are going to be going to the park, because what I want may not be what majority of the population is going to want. So you do have to know your audience, and you do have to think about what's going to bring people in.
I don't necessarily think so, because I mean, you think about Walt.
Play the undisputed intro. I'm just kidding.
No. I mean, you think about Walt. We're gonna have a pirates attraction. We're gonna have a ghost attraction. I mean, that's not really knowing your audience. That's just this. Let me give them. But that's
because there wasn't an audience yet.
But I mean, how do we know what the audience is? If us as Imagineers are thinking 2 steps ahead, how does the audience know what they want when what they want does not exist yet?
Well, a lot of the early Disneyland was based off of what was popular in movies. That's why we have a whole Western land and Frontierland, because that was like the biggest thing back in the 50s. So, I mean, we are focusing a little bit on what is popular as well. You're not inventing, like, Imagineers aren't inventing what is popular. They're finding what is currently popular and hoping that it will still be popular by the time they're done building.
And Walt based a lot of his original dark rides off of things from the studios.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew his audience. He knew, hey, I'm attaching my name to this. My studios have already like introduced this.
But look at Sleeping Beauty's
Castle. My studios have already
Castle.
gotten feedback on this.
But look at Sleeping Beauty's Castle. That is the beacon of Disneyland. Sleeping Beauty's Castle was greenlit years before Sleeping Beauty even came out.
It was originally called Snow White's Castle, according to Walt, though.
Mm-hmm.
He called it Snow White's Castle. It was originally based off of Robin Hood's castle.
Mm-hmm.
It just became Sleeping Beauty's Castle as a marketing thing after the fact.
Yeah,
he just wanted a castle.
He just wanted a castle, but he was already basing it off of popular things, like so Snow White, like you said, but also Robin Hood. So like popular folk tales that were already being told that people had already had a vested interest in.
Okay, a valid point, but I'm just saying, as a beacon, you don't know if they want that or not, and you're just gonna throw it out there in the hopes they do. I mean, I think Imagineers, when they're creating stuff, yeah, that's in the back of their mind. But if they do, I almost went to an undisputed system. If we worry too much about everybody else's focus, we can't deliver. And we are seeing that right now. When we are looking at every seasoning in the pantry, it says, I have to use everything in here to make a hamburger, it becomes a little challenging. Instead of saying, hey, if I'm going to create a hamburger, I'm going to do what I know, stick to the formula, the same way Walt said it in the beginning, and understand storytelling. I mean, I don't think you have to take into consideration what everyone else wants, because if you do, Disneyland
let's look at it this way. Okay, so Disney is going through a lot of IP stuff right now, right? Like they're hanging on to IPs and bringing those things to us. Fine. But they also have to know which IPs people want to see. Because to be completely honest, if they bring me an entire attraction based off of Hawkeye, I do not care. I do not want it. I'm not going to be motivated to come to that attraction. So
I like Rogers the Musical, so how dare you?
Okay, well, I mean, would you really want to be in a Hawkeye like ride through like dark ride?
Sure,
Rogers was an attraction based off of Hawkeye.
Yeah, but it's a show. It's not an attraction.
But the thing is, though, is some of these.
That's a bold claim.
So also, with what you're saying, though, I mean, there's a lot of gray zone, because sometimes fans are not drawn to the attraction because of the story. I mean, let's take Tron for an example. Tron has a very, very mild market, but Tron Light Cycle, the ride, people are flocking to Florida to ride this thing, not because of the attraction or the story, because of the attraction.
Yes, because
so
they use some badass ride system technology.
And if you're going to say know what your audience wants, pretty sure nobody was asking for Tron Light Cycle.
I mean, that's very fair too. Like,
well, over at to bring up Universal, they have had Waterworld as a show for decades now, which was not a good movie, but they still somehow figured that out there too, where it's just mind-boggling.
I think,
and instead they are building a Fast and Furious ride that no one asked for.
Nobody wants that. No.
Nobody wants it.
Ex-Imagineers, I'm sure, by the way. So it still kind of ties in with what we're talking about.
You know what's
but
so
yet they're
funny?
building it anyway.
Wait. You know what's so funny? How many Imagineers leave Disney to go to Universal? And then come back to Disney, or they create their own studios they like Storyland Studios. I love them, but they're creating they're literally creating parks around the world, and they were Imagineers who had their you know what? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the Imagineers who left Disney, and I'll be like, hey, remember me? I'm that girl who talked to you that one time. Can you come and tell us why you left Disney and what would have kept you at Disney for Imagineering, as far as Imagineering?
I don't know if you want to ask that question, because I feel like asking some Imagineers that left Disney why they left might tarnish how we see Disney. I feel like there's some.
I've already asked the question. I already know the answer.
I mean, not every Imagineer is the same, though.
I've already asked a handful. They were not given. They stopped being given creative liberties.
And I don't. Okay, I'm going to stay off that one because that's a 50-50 one. But when it comes to things of knowing your audience, another beacon that nobody asked for. Now, granted, everybody loves, so I will give them a little bit of credit. Nobody asked for Guardians to take over Tower of Terror. Nobody. They did it anyway, especially with Guardians being very new in the Marvel universe, and you're going to take Guardians and throw that on there. So, again, going back to, I don't think Imagineers have to know their audience. They just have to give a really good story, and that's going to sell. And my heavy hitters on that is Tron and Guardians.
A story and a ride system.
But I don't think that they are concerned at all about what's going into the shops. Granted, I understand that as a separate division within the Imagineering umbrella. I totally get that. But I think those that are designing the rides aren't focused on, okay, I now need to create a Tron backpack. I need to now create.
Well, I'm not thinking about rides in particular. I'm thinking about the land. So the creative director for the land. But yes, I agree. As far as backpacks and stuff like that go, but I'm thinking more of it. I want experiences in all of the lands. I want experiences that can turn into merchandise. I think that is a valuable storytelling piece that they could use and give us less crap merchandise.
Well, I think when you're designing a land, to your point there, when you're laying out how a land should look, you do need spots for merchandise in key areas. So I think when it comes to planning and development, yes, they do need to take that into account.
Because they want to make sure that you have easy access, that they kind of force you to walk through the shops.
Mm-hmm.
That is an Imagineering tell right there. They will admit that to you, is that they force you to walk through those shops. They push you through those because they know they have merchandise that they have to sell to make the parks money. So yeah, that's part of Imagineering as well. It's designing where those shops are going to go. But no, I know as far as creating the actual merchandise that is going into shops, those are designers. Those are clothing designers, and those are, Loungefly does their own thing. They're not owned by Disney, but they do their own thing.
So, but with the Imagineers, so we are excited for this journey. I'm excited for this journey, and to bring it full circle. What are you guys excited most about this new entity, this new show we are bringing to the Light in the Window production, Walt's apartment crew? What are you guys most excited about this journey before we close it out?
I am just excited for conversation with you guys. So even this conversation tonight, where we don't have to agree on things. We all have our own perspectives on what makes Imagineering work, what makes the parks work, and just being able to have that feedback and a real conversation with people who love the parks and want what's best for the parks and park goer experiences. So I think having those conversations and getting to talk about the people who have created the magic is what I'm most looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what we learn together. I know we have ideas on focusing on rides and Imagineers as we go through this. So I'm hoping to learn a lot and share it with everybody. So it's going to be a good time.
And Lou, to make sure that you don't go last, what are you looking forward to?
Me, honestly, I'm excited to that I've been trying this episode. I'm excited to look at things a little different and in the very Lou terms, I'm excited to get my pixie dusting on, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Lou wants to pixie dust?
Just on this show.
He wants to. Can he? We don't know.
He's been holding back for so long. Can he do it? Stay tuned.
On the next episode of Imagine That, Lou pixie dusts us.
And has a meltdown.
All in the same sentence.
Oh, man.
Amanda, what are you looking forward to? Aside from Lou's pixie dusting, which we're now all looking forward to.
Absolutely. No, I am excited for all of the creative ideas that we have for this show that we've already brainstormed about, but then there's so many different roads we can go down with this, right? There's specific Imagineers we can talk about. There's all of Marty's commandments, all of everything that has to do with Imagineering. There's so much to explore and so much of the parks that we can highlight. And it's just, I'm so excited for this opportunity to be able to learn more about these things, share them with everybody, and just spread the joy that is Disney parks and Disney Imagineering.
We want to spread the magic and use our imaginations to do it. So, hey, we may not all feel like Imagineering is constantly present in the parks right now, but it's going to be present here at Imagine That.
That's right.
Absolutely. We will talk to you guys all soon on our next episode. And until then, we hope you guys enjoy the fun. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.